Great stuff. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to this first of this Insight sessions. The one today is going to be on getting release ready. We've programmed these sessions based on the feedback that we get from doing our bi-weekly advice drop-in sessions, and also through reading all the applications we get to Launchpad Open Call. So we've got a series of 5 sessions over the next couple of months, based on the main themes that come up when we are talking to artists and music projects as well, about the kind of things that feel like they have a little bit of mystery behind them, or that often, there's a lot of questions to be asked around getting them, having kind of straight run at them. And certainly, like, the topic today around getting release ready is something that me and Scott work with almost every day, actually. And what I found over the last couple of years is that actually, just by managing so many releases, you do kind of get to learn some kind of, sort of the main do's and don'ts as much as there are with everything. So throughout the 5 sessions, they're going to be run by a combination of me and Scott. You got both of us today, which is exciting. And then we'll kind of pair off for a couple of the others as well as we go along. And you'll notice today there'll be certain things that we might skip over, because obviously there's a lot to talk about around getting a release ready. But we'll try and pick those up in the other sessions. As I already said, all the sessions will be recorded and they'll be shared with you after the event, as well as other people involved in the Launchpad project. So who am I? If you've not met me before, I think I've met a number of you on the call, but if you haven't, my name is Whiskers, real name Sam, but pretty much everyone calls me Whiskers. I run Launchpad and all the projects surrounding it, so Music Leeds, Music Local, and various projects and initiatives in other cities and towns around Yorkshire. I'm also a lecturer and academic at Leeds Beckett University, where I wrote the BA Music Industries Management course. So a lot of the stuff we're talking about on this course is stuff that I teach at both undergraduate and postgraduate level as well. So hopefully that's kind of informing what we're going to talk about. I'm also an advisor for a number of other bodies and funders. So I'm an advisor for PRS Foundation, Help Musicians and Youth Music, which basically means that I often sit on the awarding panels for all of their funds, which is really interesting and really useful, which is something I try and bring back to all these things, because I'm often seeing where other kind of emerging artists are at different stages and in different genres and in different parts of the country as well. So I always find that gives me a really useful perspective. And I've come to do all of this at my time in life because previously I was lucky enough to have a career doing most jobs in the music industry, I would say. So I was a musician myself. I was in a band that was signed to a big record label over in America, and we released on my own label in the UK. I founded the record label Dance to Radio, based in Leeds, and ran that for a few years. I also ran a music venue in the centre of Leeds for a few years. That is what that built out of. Produced some records too that did all right. And so, yeah, I've kind of been involved in various different aspects of the creative thing, which again, I think and hope gives me a good perspective on it all. So I'm going to lead today, but Scott, I've asked Scott to support. Scott, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Why not? While I'm here, yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Lewis. So yeah, I do a couple of different things as well. So I run a record label called Clue Records, independent indie label based in Leeds. So we're into we turned 10 in November. So I've been doing that for quite a while now. I also work for Come Play With Me. So that's an artist development organisation with a label, a magazine, events, aiming to sort of give a platform for underrepresented groups. So I work on the artist development at Come Play With Me. Previously ran the label there. I also lecture at Leeds Conservatoire, so music business. I do a couple of modules there, manage a couple of artists, and I'm the lead mentor for Launchpad and just sort of generally help out Whiskers whenever he needs it. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, need a lot of help most of the time. Yeah, so that's us, and hopefully you're all aware of what Launchpad is. I don't actually think I've got a slide to explain it, but you've been invited to this call because you've all engaged with us at some point around our open calls or our previous events. And as we go through this, we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of support Launchpad can give. Again, I will stress, one of the reasons we're trying to do these sessions is because in terms of our one-to-one support on the open calls, we know it's finite, and the sort of demand way outstrips what we can do. So we're trying to create as many other kind of resources and points that we can kind of help and guide you. And again, hopefully you are aware, like, we have regular drop-ins that you can come. So this is a really good way for us to kind of get a lot of info out in one go. But I do want to say, like, we are always here for a chat as well as we go on. So these are some of the things that we're going to go through over the next sort of 40 minutes, hour or so, in terms of getting release ready. We're obviously going to start with planning the release and setting some goals. One of the first things I like to challenge is almost like why you're planning, why you are releasing at any minute, at any given time, what kind of assets you need to think about getting ready, how you work with distributors and DSPs. I will use the phrase DSPs a lot, and if you're not aware, that is kind of the collective term for streaming platforms and digital download services. Then what you can do to start promoting your release. As I say, that's going to be quite a sort of slimmed down version, because then we're going to do a whole session around promoting yourself later in these series. We're going to touch on a little bit about direct to fan and building fan base. And again, sort of an initial touch on what it means in terms of royalties and the kind of the money that comes from releasing. But again, we'll pick up more on that in a couple of weeks as well. So planning your release. Big thing when an artist comes to us looking to release is we really try and talk to them about when is the best time for releasing and why they're intending to release at a given time. I hate to say it, but kind of like more often than not, when an artist comes to us looking to release, it's quite often because they're really, really excited because they've written, a new song, or they feel like there's a lot of pressure because no one's heard from them for a while. And really, when you rush into releasing a track for in that way, it often can mean that there's not a longer term plan, and it's not always got the kind of backing behind it to kind of move forward and really make the best out of that release. And so one of the things when you're starting to look at releases that I urge all the artists that we work with to do is think about why they're releasing, why the song or the collection of songs they're releasing is the right collection to do, and what doing it now and in a certain way, like what impact is that going to have. The other big trap that a lot of people fall into is kind of moving quickly with a release when it's nearly finished, and kind of setting up release dates or setting things in motion when you don't necessarily have everything together. And we found a number of artists kind of fall into the trap where they're kind of stuck because there are simple things that you can get stuck on, like artwork, that prevent you from even kind of uploading a release. But then even if you've got a release kind of uploaded, there are things such as like video content, promotional things that you can maybe not have given yourself enough time to do, that can then really hamper how good or effective a release can be. I think the other thing that I challenge a lot of artists to think about is kind of what are they wanting from a release. So is the song, if they're wanting to release a track so it gets on radio or get a kind of like really snappy amount of attention, is it the right song? Like, if it's just the next song that you've written, if you feel like there's a pressure to keep getting stuff out, is that song the one that is going to do that, or is it better to wait and kind of have a collection of songs and make a sort of informed choice around what's going to do the best thing for you? Have you got something to follow that release up with? Because actually, again, if you don't have the momentum, it's quite hard for a song in isolation to do what you want with it. Now, of course, if you're really new and it's really exciting, then putting a track out there and seeing what happens, can be fun and can kind of be a good way to gauge that interest. But if you are trying to build, you kind of need to have stuff to build with. And again, we found that when stuff goes really well, the question from people who are interested in in following up a track, whether it's at radio or at press, is like, well, what's next? And if you're unable to answer that, it makes it really, really hard to build from any success that you might have had with a track that comes out. Have you got time to promote the track properly? Again, there's a bit of kind of, you know, if you haven't got all your assets together, have you thought about whether it's a period in your life even that you really can throw at making that work? You know, can you kind of drill out that time? Is the initial time that you wanted to release actually the best time for you personally, with all the kind of pressures that life have nowadays? Because you really want to kind of make it an enjoyable experience, not put yourself under too much stress to kind of enjoy promoting it and not feel like it's a drag to kind of post on socials and things like that. And then finally, like, are you able to promote the release with live dates? Now, not all artists will have a live setup, but certainly, like, again, we found in loads of different ways that kind of having kind of a live some kind of live experience, shall we say, really helps the momentum. And even down to posting on things like social media, if you've got a live gig to post about at the same time as just going, stream my new song, it can feel slightly more natural. And so again, if there's a reason why you can't promote it, maybe some of the band are away, maybe you are still working on pulling that show together, then maybe it's worth considering waiting so like all those things come together. And I've kind of touched on a bit of this already, but when I was saying about like, is it a single and would the track get played on radio? It is worth thinking about what you want to achieve with the release. And many of you might be sitting there and think, well, I want to do all of those things, but there are slightly, different ways of doing each of these things that involve engaging with slightly different bits of the of kind of like the music industry, really. And we'll kind of touch on some of them as we go through. One of the main things I would say is, building a fan base is not just about building your streams on Spotify, for example. What do you want from building a fan base? You can actually have low streams and high fans through using things like direct to fan, which is why we're trying to look at a variety of things today. Getting release ready doesn't just mean dumping a track onto Spotify. So do think about what it is, that particular track. Again, it might be around how that track is sonically, the track length, all these kind of things that lend it to some of these things more than others. And again, I suppose the thing is to not expect more from a release than is easily gettable in a way, because some of these aspects will be harder with some new music than others. And just thinking about how you're going to address these points or other points that I might not have mentioned here will help you feel more at ease with the releasing process, and hopefully less stressed when you don't land immediately on a big playlist on day one. So as I was kind of stressed quite a lot already, quite a lot of this really is about timescales and getting everything ready in advance, so it's not stressful, and so you've got the best chance to kind of move forwards with stuff. When we're talking to artists about releasing, we really recommend that they have everything ready 6 weeks before the release date for a single, and that's actually probably on the short end as well. That's Scott's nodding here, is that's probably, ideally it would be more than that, but realistically we know that that it can be difficult. In a session in next month, we'll talk more about approaching press and things like that, but you will find that press will want to potentially factor in releases up to 4 to 6 weeks of advance. Now, press nowadays works in all kinds of different shapes and forms, but again, if you're trying to build, you will want that kind of length of time as well. The main kind of fixed factor that really determines releases that we support on is, of course, one of the big things everyone wants to look at is pitching for playlists. That's very much seen as the kind of golden egg at the minute when releasing new music, a way that an artist with kind of no track record can break. It's super hard, it's super competitive. Of course, we do see unknown artists get those breaks. You will know artists who kind of get on there, and artists can get on those playlists without big companies backing them, which is one of the reasons why it feels like such an opportunity. Now, Spotify do quite a lot of outreach. At the minute, the only thing you can pitch for publicly is Spotify. And what Spotify tell you is that, I'll talk a little bit about the process, but what they say a lot when they do talks is that they want you to pitch to them 4 weeks in advance, which means it needs to be uploaded and on their system 4 weeks in advance. So again, when artists come to us and are wanting to release something 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance, and are hoping it will get picked up on a playlist, from what Spotify have told us, you're immediately, diminishing the likelihood that that will happen from what Spotify tell us. So that becomes quite a bit of a fixed defining factor. Now, we do know stuff does get picked up in that smaller window, but we're trying to kind of relay what we get told by people like Spotify as well. And the other thing to remember is it's all very well saying it needs to be that planning to get it up 4 weeks in advance, but of course, depending on which distributor you use and how you get it up online, from you pressing submit, it can still take a week, and actually even more. I mean, there was a horror story with an artist we worked with who'd actually done a lot of the good planning and pressed submit through a distributor, but then for some reason it never got processed, and it was 2 weeks before release, of the first track of an EP campaign, before they eventually got it kind of onto DSP. So again, giving yourself as much time as possible allows any snags to kind of like get fixed, basically. So just a little note on release dates. So again, some of you will be well aware of this, but the global release day, that is the official term for it, actually. Global release day is Friday, which is basically the internationally recognized day for releasing new music. That's when everyone releases new music. But you'll also be aware that not everyone releases new music on Friday, and various people will pop up with releases on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And quite often that is because they know that they'll get press or radio play on those days. Now, the official line, again, from the feedback that we've got, is that the DSPs like the music to come out on Fridays, and that what they've said is that it is more likely to get featured in playlists if it comes out on a Friday. They're more likely to consider it. I have a caveat to that. But we know from speaking to PR companies, press and media, that of course it's slightly easier to potentially get press for releases if it's not on a Friday, because essentially it's less competitive. So there's always, going back to what I was saying about what your goals are, there is a little bit of a compromise to consider there. If you are trying to get bits of press, you might want to consider having a release date that is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If you are confident in what you're doing and you're feeling like it's really streamlined, you want it in line with other releases, generally then Friday is the day to go. The caveat I was going to say around the DSP saying that they prefer Fridays is it's my feeling that, say you release on a Wednesday, if it does really well Wednesday, Thursday, there is probably more chance it would get put on a playlist on the Friday. But equally, if it comes out on a Wednesday and it doesn't do very well, there's potentially less chance of that happening. Scott, I don't know if you want to chip in with any bit from your experience on that.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think you've covered it really well, because I think we are in the middle of an album campaign with a band called Pit Pony, and we have been releasing it on. They've had previous editorial support at Spotify from singles and spot players. A good, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We've released now 3 tracks from this record that's coming out on the 1st of July. We've not had any editorial support so far. We've been releasing the tracks on Wednesdays. So that may have come into it, but the PR company we were working with said it was much better for them to cut through on a midweek thing. The press has been better on that. And also going back to the goals, what Whiskers is talking about earlier on, if we can get editorial support, great, but actually we've sold a load of records of this artist without the Spotify streaming, and we've on t-shirts and merch and stuff like that. So that was one of ours, to really push on the physical side of it. So we identified that and said that Spotify editorial would be a bonus. But yeah, I think you've captured it really well there, Whiskers. Yeah.
And I think the clear thing about all of this, like I said, is there's no set way to do any of this. It's determined by what your goals are, and everything slightly changes depending on so many different variations. So it's just about trying to kind of pass on this knowledge, pass on our experience, and so you can make the kind of best decisions for you with all of this stuff as well. So yeah. Yeah, so just a note on, sorry, there's loads of text on this screen. Just a note on multiple releases, because I'm kind of like, when I approached kind of trying to put all this out there, I was thinking of a release as a single, you know, how you approach doing a single, but at the same time, you know, right at the start, I was saying, how do you follow up with other releases? And it's really, really worth thinking about how you do that. So you might be releasing you know, 4 individual tracks that are bundled into a 4-track EP at the end. Well, actually, if you're working with DSPs or even direct to fan, kind of how do you do that? Again, what are the goals for each of those releases that you might do? So again, the facts that we know is that Spotify want you to release a lot, but you can't pitch more than 1 track every 4 weeks because they want you to do every 4 weeks, right? And you can only pitch 1 track at a time. One important other thing to remember is that one of the main playlists that artists can get on easily, because it's one of the algorithmic playlists, is Release Radar, that hopefully you're all aware of. Now, actually, and basically, if you've pitched it, your release should show up in your followers or people who've listened to you before on their Release Radar. That's how it works. And a new track from you can show in people's Release Radar up to 4 weeks after release. So again, if you're releasing multiple quicker than every 4 weeks, you can potentially kind of stymie how much of your tracks can get into those kind of playlists. And it's not just a Spotify issue as well. Like if you're releasing really, really quickly, like quicker than 4 weeks, or even a bit longer than 4 weeks, it can be really hard to get that repeat coverage from press and radio. And again, we know specifically from radio is they like to focus on 1 track, and the kind of build, if you are trying to get international radio, sometimes it can be good to go back in over a course of, you know, quite a few weeks to try and build that single track rather than hit them with new stuff all the time. And I think I've got a good example of this next. Yes. So this is a track that we just worked, an album campaign we worked with recently, that we really managed how we dropped all those releases. And I wanted to show it to you as a good example. The image of the EP release on the right is the last single that we released, called Glimmer. That was the last single before the album that came out, which is called When We Are in Bloom. Basically, we dropped 4 singles before the album came out and did them all at 4-week intervals. And that meant that we could pitch each one within Spotify. And it also meant that each one had its own time to kind of get radio play. And all the tracks that we pitched to radio got at least 1 play on Radio 6 Music. In fact, I think most of them got 2 or 3 plays, which we were quite pleased with. There is a slight except. There are 2 kind of added bits to this. The track Glimmer that we actually only released a week before the album had already been released once on Spotify. And if you're not aware, you can't pitch a track that's already been released once. So we couldn't pitch that, but that actually worked into our plan. And that's why we released it the week before the album, because we didn't pitch that to Spotify. We pitched another track from the album to Spotify. And what we did is the track before that we released, this track called When We Were, we didn't send that one to radio. So when I'm talking about what each track is doing, we use Glimmer as a track that we pushed to radio to push the album when the album actually came out. But we use When We Were and another album track called Breathe as the tracks that we were pushing towards Spotify. And what we found is that it worked well with radio, and we did have this success I just mentioned in terms of Release Radar, because what happened is with every release, like one of the tracks was getting pushed through to Release Radar and getting a few thousand plays. The other thing around this build-up of releases that I sort of brushed over easily is this way of releasing when you're sort of building up to an EP or an album that the industry called waterfalling. And that is where you add the previous release to your next single. So again, if you can see on screen this example of this single Glimmer that we released, well, the order in which we released the tracks is the first single we released was Ascend, then the second was Bloom, then we released When We Were, and then Glimmer. And with each track, the previous one was added to the release. So when we released Bloom, Ascend was track 2. When we released When We Were, Bloom and Ascend were tracks 2 and 3. And again, we found that really boosted the lifeline of all of those tracks as we went along, leading up to the album release. And we found it worked really, really well, as opposed to just releasing a single track at a time. It really gave all of those tracks a lifeline building up to the album release. Yeah, hopefully that's kind of given it a bit more colour. And you've probably seen artists, The Smile have done it in a really big way. I think they ended up releasing about 7 tracks by the end before they released their album. So now you know this, you might notice more and more artists that are doing this kind of technique. But as I said, we did it a little bit. There was an added level with Precept where we pitched a different song to radio as well as within Spotify. Okay, so moving on to kind of getting your assets ready. Before you sort of finalize when you're going to release it, you do think about what you need to get ready. And some of it's really obvious, is that you need your recording, you need your mastered recording. But we still come across artists who put stuff in motion before that recording is mastered. They've got their date fixed, and then, in fact, I've just had it with an artist we're working with now. They had the release date all set up, and then they got a pop in the master, and it took a week to get fixed, which then threw out all these other time frames because they were working really tight to that 4 to 6 weeks. You also need your pack shot artwork. Again, especially if it's a big body of work and you're working on an EP or an album, again, the amount of times it's all ready to go, but then you don't have the artwork. And again, if it is an album and you're going to do different singles, have you got the artwork and the album artwork and the single artwork? Don't underestimate the importance of having promo photos now as well. Again, the feedback we get from, and we'll come to it in a minute, from the DSPs, but also press companies, is they want that refreshed with every release. If you're going to press, trying to get press for a release every time, they want a new picture of you. You know, it's very unlikely that they will run stories for releases after releases with the same promo photos. And there are easy ways around that. The one we always used to do is, if we ever did a photo shoot, is take about 3 t-shirts with us, so we can swap them out. So it looked like they were different shots, but actually we did it all in the same kind of half hour. Think about a press release, whether it's a super formal press release or you've just got the assets around things like a description of the song and the kind of quote from an artist. Those things can be really invaluable when you're approaching people. And again, that's something we'll go through in more detail in a later session. And the final thing I just wanted to add, because it's come up a few times recently, that's not been nailed down, is if you are planning to release a track and it's a track that you've written, which I imagine is the case for most people here, is make sure you do know who has written it and what the splits are. Now, normally I would consider that sort of slightly separate and more to do with royalties in a way, and I'll talk about that in much more detail in 2 weeks' time. But I'm currently having to unpick 2 or 3 releases because there was no conversation around like who had contributed to the songwriting before release. So if you've got all of this in advance, then that is super helpful. Is someone
quick one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a quick one from me on that, on the master recordings as well. So that's obviously your track, the finished track that's going to be out everywhere. But if it's got swearing in it or anything like that, make sure you've got a clean edit, and that's also mastered. Or a radio edit, if it's longer and you want to do a shorter version for radio, that's going to be a bit better to work out there. Get that, include that in there. But also an instrumental version as well. Ask your producer to take off the vocals, get a nice instrumental version that you can use for publishing and everything like that. So do that all in that one go, so you're not having to go back to your mastering engineer or your mixing engineer and say, oh, I need this. Get it all done in one go. And on promo shots, promo photos, landscape and portrait, make sure you're getting a good selection of both. Don't just go down one. And I've seen artists just get a lot of portrait ones, and usually on blog pieces, it'll be a nice landscape picture that they want. So make sure you get a good variety of both, different angle, different ratios on that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I've got a feeling somewhere I wrote down metadata on here as well, and I'm just wondering if we're going to get to some of these extra things in a slide or two, but we'll see. So when it comes to the actual releasing, then there's obviously a lot of choice out there. There are quite a lot of distributors out there at the minute, and all of them have pros and cons. And we've worked with, I'll talk briefly in a second, but through Launchpad, we do work directly with artists to release their music, and we work with 2 different distributors: an independent called Kicker and a company called AWOL that was was part of a big group called Cobalt, but now been bought by Sony as well. And they all have pros and cons, and there's even within those distributors who help you get your music up on things like on the DSPs, there is a lot of competition even within them. I mean, I know one of the most successful artists, from around here, I know he's doing really well with both one with DistroKid and one with TuneCore. So there is a lot of things out there, and you can kind of make your own successes through them. But the things I would always suggest if you're starting to look at releasing your music is there a way to speak to the people who are distributing them? If you have a problem, is there a direct line of contact? And from that, can you build a relationship with them? I'm not sure what do they was going to say. But it was probably not important, which is why I left it. But also looking at what do they charge? Maybe that was on do they charge? What do they charge? If you've looked into releasing music, or you already have, you'll be aware that most distributors now, they sort of charge a set fee. I was going to say I'm kind of on the fence as to what is better, whether distributors charge a set fee or distributors who charge a percentage. I'm not quite on the fence. I sort of think distributors who take a percentage is a slightly better model, because even if it might mean that if you're successful, you're giving them more money. I would like to think they probably worked for it at that point, and they're potentially more invested in you, doing more if they're taking a percentage as opposed to just charging £20 at the point in which you click submit. But there are lots of different ways of thinking about it. But do have a look round. And again, we actually work directly with about 40 artists now at Launchpad to sort of support their releases directly through distribution. I'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of weeks as well. And if anyone does want to talk to us about that, you are welcome to. At the minute, well, to date, it's mostly been artists who've been supported through Launchpad, but it is becoming an increasing number of other artists who are talking to us through sessions like this or our advice drop-ins as well. So yeah, do bear in mind if you do want to talk to us about those practicalities. Here we go. I knew I'd mentioned metadata. So when you actually come to uploading, I mentioned about the songwriting splits because that is important in terms of stopping arguments and other disagreements. But actually, when you do come to upload, do make sure you have made a note of not just the songwriters, but the performers as well, and also any producer contributions. There is a real drive within the music industry to make sure that as much data is accurate on tracks. All the distributors kind of capture it in different ways, but if you do kind of capture it accurately, anyone who's involved in the recording who wants to kind of be linked to it in the future, if you're putting it down when you upload, it makes all that easier as we go along. The other thing to remember at the point of uploading is if you are planning future releases and it's part of an upcoming campaign, so something like I described with Precepts, again, the feedback we get from the platforms is that if you are able to release to upload all the releases at once or at least as early as possible, it helps them kind of know what you're doing. And we've had that feedback on both sides. We've had that from platforms, and we know from labels when they've done it that it has worked particularly well. So for example, with that Precept release, when we uploaded all the album for releasing like 3 or 4 months in advance, and then kind of dropped in all the singles kind of as we go as different releases. And one of the things is if you are aiming specifically for pitching, if you say in your pitch that this is part of an album campaign, whoever reads it on the other side can literally see it all, that you have got it all planned out and mapped out. So if you are in a position where you can do that, that would be good. So the other key thing at the point of sort of uploading, like one of the first things you should do, and again, it depends whether you are new to releasing or you already have released, is one of the most important things you could do if you're hoping for success on the platforms is claim your artist profile and make sure it is updated. There are still quite a lot of people who don't realize that you can do this. So your artist page on all the streaming platforms, you can grab and you can upload your own promo photos and update the description and add all your social links in. So obviously Spotify is the kind of main one that people are aware of, and as I've already said and mentioned, that by claiming your Spotify profile, that is what allows you to pitch. It is within your Spotify profile account that allows you to pitch for playlists. You can also claim your profile on Apple. That has the added benefit of showing when you have been Shazammed, because Apple also own Shazam, which is actually kind of interesting. Because again, I was just talking to an artist who is going to get a placement on an advert, and we were saying, well, when that happens, we should keep an eye on the Shazams and seeing if there's any kind of uptake from that. I have had less experience of these, but you can also update your profiles on Deezer and Amazon. Not sure what else there is. I actually, Tidal are developing it, but haven't done one yet, from what I can tell. But those are the main ones that are out there. And again, the feedback is that the more updated and up to date all your profiles are, the more likely it is you are to kind of gain attention from within them. So things to think about. I knew I'd written landscape portrait somewhere as well. There's things to think about when you're updating your artist profile, is that you've got your asset, you've got your photos, you've got a bio. So again, mentioned earlier about all the things to think about at the start is if you've got a press release, that can kind of have part of your bio and be on there. You've got your links to social media. On Spotify, you can do two other really useful things, which I think we'll touch on a little bit as well. You can create your own playlists. So again, it can be a useful way to either include your own music or shout about other people's music. Great thing to do is make a playlist of bands that you really like, maybe bands that you're friends with, so you know that they'll share it, but include loads of your own songs in there. Tag them all on social media. They share the music with them on, and it also gets them to share your music as well. Another thing with playlists, again, we're working with an artist whose sound has changed dramatically over the last few years, but is really keen to not take their old music down. So they've created a playlist of of their whole kind of discography and ordered it in a way that they want people to listen to it, basically. So they pin that kind of on their Spotify profile. So it works like that. And one of the main things I end up shouting about artists about when it comes to release date is to get a canvas on Spotify. If you're not aware, a canvas is the video that kind of plays behind the release when you press play on Spotify and mobile. But it's also a really nice thing that when you share a track on Spotify to Instagram stories, that's where you get those little videos, and it's dead. I was going to say it's dead easy to. It can actually be really faffy to do. I'm sure I've spent loads of time trying to do it, but I really like sharing all my friends and all the artists we support their music on Friday. And it really frustrates me when I come to do that and people don't have a canvas, so it makes my Instagram look less nice. You can do it before release date as well. I know a lot of people will wait until it's released and then do it, but as soon as that music is in your uploaded in your Spotify profile, you can add your canvas right there and then.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well, Whiskers. Yeah, it is. I think it's pretty easy to do. It can be a bit faffy, but I do it on the app. You could literally record a bit on your phone and upload it. As long as it's under 8 seconds, you're fine. So it doesn't have to be a big production or anything too difficult to do. Make it as simple and as sort of aesthetically relevant to you as an artist. But also, if you've got those old releases, you've got stuff from years ago, you can go back through and add canvases to them. So if you've got one sort of generic one with the artist name in there or a nice press shot, go back and stick it onto all them as well. Because when people come to you brand new as a new audience member or somebody who's just found out about you and they're going checking out your back catalogue, they'll be going through those tracks. They might find something they love and they'll share that to Instagram as well. So yeah, make sure, like, if you can, it's nice and easy enough to do, go and do your whole back catalogue as well and get it all your house in order.
Yeah, and again, like the feedback we get is that if you are hoping for things like playlists, the more stuff, like the more love you show, Spotify, the more things like this you do, it increases the chances that that they will look at you as well. They will kind of listen to you. So on that, pitching to Spotify. So as we've touched on quite a lot, is that with Spotify, any artist, anyone who uploads their music can pitch to Spotify to be included on their playlists, and that means loads of different things. It's to be included on the algorithmic playlist, so things like Release Radar, and they say that is a given if you pitch it ahead of time. But it also means you're in with a chance to be on one of their bigger playlists. And again, we know there are stories where stuff does get picked up on various different playlists from a completely independent point of view as well. As we already said, they say that you need to have it uploaded 4 weeks ahead. The app says that you need to, if you do it less than 7 days, it doesn't get included on release radars. I've heard, you know, there's evidence that both of those things, you can get around those, but if you're trying to give yourself the best shot, then you probably should aim for pitching it at least 4 weeks in advance. And as we said earlier, giving yourself the time to actually get it uploaded as well. Again, it's really hard to know kind of like what kind of cuts through when you pitch it. When you pitch it, you have to tickle a bunch of boxes around the kind of mood that it is, the instruments that you use, the kind of feel of the track. There's a lot of tag words that you can tick, and then you get the opportunity to type. I think it's about, I'll get the details of this when I do this next time. I think it's about 300 to 400 characters that you get to write. You know, Scott?
I thought it was 500, but yeah, it's around that. And 300 to 500, it's like it's a decent enough window, but yeah, you just want to cram as much as you can in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't write loads and loads. And again, one of the feedbacks we've got is that they want it to be directive. So actually saying like which playlists you think it would go in, or what other artists you sound similar to is, again, we've heard that is what cuts through. It's not a very kind of transparent process, but there is sort of those kind of feedback there as well. Again, it's useful to know if there is kind of backing or support for your music. So if it's picking up radio play, if it's picking up kind of key bits of press. The other bit we've heard is that, again, if you think about a lot of Spotify playlists, they are kind of like mood based or like scene based. So if you're actually describing the track and the emotions and things like that in it, that and the sound of the track, that can cut through as much as kind of loads of posturing around, you know, you being a 4-piece band and things like that. You know, it is more about kind of like, if you imagine what they're looking for when they're trying to kind of put something in a kind of stormy day type playlist, it's those kind of things that might pick up. The big thing to mention about it is there's absolutely tons of resource there. You know, Spotify put absolutely tons out there about how to approach them and how to kind of optimize your stuff to the best extent to do stuff. So once you've got your Spotify for Artists set up, it is really, really worth to dig around some of their resources, their videos. I was kind of having a refresh of it when I was putting this together, and just the Found by Spotify kind of gives you loads of markers in terms of what to do. And again, you might find some of it kind of a bit overwhelming, or you might find, you know, a lot to do, but take what you can out of it and do what you can to kind of apply to sort of try and have that success. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here is like a screenshot from Found by Spotify, just so you can kind of see the way that they talk about it. So they talk about, there is guidance in like what they are thinking in terms of pitching it to playlists, how you can use Spotify to you know, to promote your, you know, what Spotify gives you to promote your music. And again, talking a little bit out of order, but again, the feedback we get is if you're getting support from Spotify, that they actually track how much you shout about it and so on. So, you know, they want that kind of love, you know, these promo cards. And again, you've got it there around uploading canvases to drive shares and engagement. It's one of those things, if you want Spotify to show you love and they're telling you to upload canvases to drive shares and engagement, then you probably should be doing that. Where am I now? Okay, so in terms of moving away from Spotify specifically, or well, maybe not actually, is just in terms of getting everything kind of lined up for your release, is once you've done everything you can kind of in the platforms, once you're sort of shouting to the world, you know, it's about telling people obviously that you've got a release out there. And before you even think about that, if you're trying to set yourself up to kind of get picked up on these playlists and specifically Release Radar, then having people follow you on Spotify is what it is. What Spotify says, everyone who follows you on Spotify will get served your new release in Release Radar. So it stands to reason the more people who follow you, you know, the better. So if you've not been asking people to do that, if you've not heard the kind of marketing speak around call to action, then it's absolutely worth, you know, to set up a release and ask people to, you know, to follow you on all these platforms and things like that. You've probably seen various artists do these things called pre-saves. So pre-saves is kind of does what it says on the tin in terms of pre-saving the music before release date, so it automatically gets added to your to a fan's music catalog on release date. Again, there are quite a lot of services out there that can support you in doing this. I'll run through them in a minute. They're not too difficult. Some of them can be a little faffy to set up, but not too difficult. The main thing you usually need is something called the UPC, which is the Universal Product Code, and that is something that you would just get once you've uploaded your tracks to a distributor. Then somewhere in that dashboard would be the UPC, and you use that to generate the pre-save. There's a lot of focus when we talk about pre-saves around pre-saving and things like Spotify, but if you're doing any kind of pre-release sort of promotion, absolutely don't forget to do things like download pre-orders as well. There's one release we did where we kind of twigged that the artist had a lot of audience on iTunes and made that like the second top button. And in terms of, again, talking about goals, in terms of making money back, you get quite a lot more money from downloads if you're doing that than on streams. And if you can, there's a big difference between the financial impact of 50 pre-save streams and 50 pre-order downloads as well. And you can do the same with Bandcamp as well, which I'll talk about a little bit further on. So in terms of actually, oh, there you go. Obviously duplicated that slide. I'll have to make one. So look at that. So in terms of actually setting up these pre-saves, going to kind of, with Scott's help, kind of there's really three main options, isn't there, Scott? There's Smart URL, Feature FM, and presave.io, which various people use. Do you want to talk about Smart URL for a minute? And I'll.
Yeah, so Smart URL. I don't know if you can go on that top one, Whiskers, on that the presave, the gorgeous one.
I can. I just have to do something else.
So this will show you the landing page for this Smart URL. So this is an artist, Gorgeous, released on Clue Records. You can see there the album. It's called Prototypical. It's out on the 2nd of September. We just put the first single out yesterday, Monday this week. So we're sending everybody to this landing page. And on here, you can go on to whichever platform that you use to listen to music. And I think obviously Whiskers and everybody is guilty of saying Spotify all the time, Spotify, because that's just the industry goal. Everybody wants to get everything on Spotify, but there are millions of users on other platforms. So make sure that all of them are in there in a nice, aesthetically pleasing way as well. And the top end of it, the pre-save part is there that's for the actual album. So you can, in this, as you'll see on the next link, there is an embed option for a video. But here you can add people can add the tracks to their playlist or to the library. Nice and easy to do that there. Up on the top left, you can see there's a follow artist button and a follow 100% Gorgeous playlist. So by pre-saving the track, those two things automatically happen as well. So not only does the person pre-save the track, but they also become a follower of your profile. So as Whiskers said, it really helps you for all your future release radar stuff and building up that on there. So yeah, this is what Smart URL looks like for a pre-save. The Pit Pony one, this is the other album we've got. So we're well into this campaign now. Good few singles going. So that's the video embed in there. So you can drop any video you want straight in there at the top. We've decided against doing a pre-save for this one, despite the album not being out yet, because we're focusing on the vinyl, as I mentioned before, the physical product. So you can see there's Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple Music, and then there's a lot of independent vinyl places as well. So we've decided that that's where we want the focus to be, less so on the streaming side of it. But again, further down you go, there's SoundCloud again, there'll be Deezer there, there's all of the usual suspects, and you can add in your live shows and stuff like that on there. So Smart URL is really easy, straightforward to use. It's free. To get the pre-save option for Spotify, you've just got to sign up for an account, but it's all pretty intuitive. It's really nice. You can make it look how you want to within reason, and it's good on the embeds and all the different links there. So yeah, Smart URL is one that we use quite often with artists on Clue, both Clue and Come Play With Me, because it does all these things really nicely. It's a nice landing page for people coming to it. Presave.io is on here. I'll talk about that quickly now as well. So this one is asking people to pre-save is great, and a lot of people will do. If you say please go and follow me, or if they see that first screen, they may do that. People just usually want things to be quite easy, and they'll go in and they'll find the music and that'll do. Or even myself, I'm guilty of not pre-saving stuff. I'll wait until something comes up. I'll know that I'm following the artist, and I'll wait for it to hit my release radar. So incentivizing people to do it is a great way to make sure that they do actually pre-save the track or follow your account. So presave.io allows you to do that in an intuitive way. It's set up there. You can sign up, run a competition through that for whatever you want. So that, as it says, it could be a one-off t-shirt, cassette tape version that you've only made one of them. It could be a test pressing if you've done a vinyl. It could be handwritten lyrics. It could be big and grand and cost you a lot of money and really attract a lot of people. It could be really like sort of personal, and you really put a lot of heart and detail and effort into it and doesn't cost you a lot of money. So think about what your fans would want, or what the people who listen to your music would really engage with. Once you've got that, the way to do it, you can do it for free without using presave.io, and that's just for ask people for screenshots to send that through on socials to verify that they have pre-saved or followed you on a social media platform, on a streaming platform, and then you can do that through there. Presave.io is a much easier, slicker way to do it. It costs about 26, 27 quid per month. And you can go in there, sign up, make it look nice and easy, run the pre-save competition, have people enter it, draw the winner afterwards. You also get all of the people who've entered email addresses, so you can start building up your mailing list. And once you've done it for that 1 month, you've paid your 20, 25, 27 quid, whatever it is, you can just stop it, and you don't have to keep on going for 12 months either. So it can be a nice, easy way to get all that information, to run it in a simple, straightforward way that doesn't really cost you too much money. But the incentivizing part of that is it can really, really work. We've seen a lot of benefits of doing that, because a lot more people interact with it, knowing that they're going to get something out of the transaction there.
Great, thanks, Scott. That's great. So I think we've kind of covered a lot of this as well when we're talking about these kind of pre-saves and sort of signposting and calls to action. Is it's not just to concentrate on one platform. Thinking about what you're trying to build, whether it's streaming or physical releases and things like Bandcamp. We're going to talk about a little bit about collecting email addresses and mailing lists again in a minute as well. Bandcamp is, again, if you're not aware, Bandcamp is something you have to set up yourself. And again, maybe we'll have some feedback after this session, but if there is specific things around working with, say, Bandcamp, that is something we can talk about a little bit more, but it's relatively simple to set up, and actually you can set up just simple downloads through it, or you could do all singing, all dancing campaigns with merchandise and things as well. And again, things like Bandcamp, one of the reasons we talk about Bandcamp being beneficial, and I'm probably repeating something that'll come up in a few slides, is that the reason Bandcamp is called direct to fan is that it is the artist being direct to the fan. So you have access to like who it is who's actually buying your things and contacting them through things like mailing lists and stuff as well. So when you're doing your pre-save thing, don't forget, like if you can pull something together like a Bandcamp, don't forget to include that as well. And here we go, mailing lists. So like other ways to do it is if you are collecting email addresses, that is a great way to do it. And we've seen artists of all kinds of genres work with mailing lists. It is something that, as much as everyone gets email spammed, it is a direct way to get through in a way that perhaps social media isn't always. It's probably not going to change, although it probably will. I've jinxed the whole of emails, which is maybe not a bad thing. But you are not in control of the data of who follows you on things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, but you can be in charge of who follows you, of which email addresses you've collected by selling your music to people on things like Bandcamp. You can also, if you are doing things like live shows and collecting email addresses, then you can kind of tag the audience by location and things like that. If you're using, whether you've set it up as your own spreadsheet or you use a platform like MailChimp to manage it. And it can, again, mean that you can do quite clever things in terms of emailing people to make them aware of what you're doing. It also really allows your personality to shine out as well. So two artists who I'm on the mailing list of that I actually enjoy getting emails from at the minute are Yardact and Chedu Araka, who is a rapper from Hull, who Chedu's emails are fantastic because he customizes it so it has your name in the title. So I receive emails from Chedu that says "Now then Whiskers," as if they're a personal, message to me. And so I feel very welcomed when I read them. And so you can do all these kind of things with email that are perhaps less easy on things like social media. You can also, again, depending on how active you are on online, we know it can be difficult, but there are ways you can build a forum for fan communities. Have you got examples of these, Scott, on Facebook and WhatsApp?
Yeah, a little bit. So Facebook, I think one of the best examples in recent years has been Idol's, or is it All Is Love Gang? But yeah, so it's they've got or AF Gang. So that was set up, and that's like turned into this huge community for the band Idol's fans, and has become more than just talking about them. It brings in new artists and different things like that. So for Pit Pony, somebody messaged the band about 3 weeks ago and said, "Can I set up a group for you?" And they were like, "Oh, that's a bit weird, but yeah, go ahead." And they called it the Stable, and it's a really nice. There's a nice community in there, and people are growing that, and it was sort of naturally came out of fans. But you can do that if you feel there's a desire for it, or you could ask a mate to do it as a favour for you. And so it looks like it's coming less from the artist. WhatsApp broadcast groups. So this is on WhatsApp. It's a bit more intrusive, obviously, if it's coming in as a message. With people, when they sign up to maybe a mailing list or something like that, you can ask for a phone number at times, and obviously, if you've got the permission to use it with the correct bits on there. But you can add these people in to a WhatsApp broadcast group, which essentially means you send messages out to the people on this group. They can't reply to you. It doesn't turn into a big back and forth of like a Facebook chat group or anything like that, or a normal WhatsApp group. Speaking of Chedu does it really well, and has got one of these going, and I get videos and all sorts coming from Chedu regularly. So it's a good way to directly communicate with your audience again. So yeah, just two different things. With these, it's working out what's right for you as an artist and how you feel who your audience is, and how best to communicate with them as well. But yeah, these are definitely different options to consider.
Yeah, and what feels natural to you, because again, there is a danger of creating a lot of work for yourself to promote, but if that is what you're trying to give yourself over to do, it is worth thinking about that. And the other one that I've had experience with, not directly but with an artist, is on Discord as well. That's not something I use, but a lot of people are using it for different things now, and it lends itself to quite an old school message board feel, which some people like really find really good as well. So yeah, just thinking about what works for you with that as well. And then the other thing not to underestimate is physical posters and flyers as well, whether it's around your like locale, like where you're based, or when you're playing live as well. And again, how can you use that physical thing to like immediately direct people to like how you want to capture them? So is that obviously people are potentially not as likely to kind of write in a URL that is listed on it. So can you use graphic visual tools like QR codes, which, I think maybe, one of those weird things that COVID did is it made everyone reach more people, a bigger audience through video messaging if that needs to be. And the other one is everyone kind of knows how to use QR codes now from having to do test and trace. And of course you can link that to pre-saves or your website or mailing lists and wherever you want to go as well. And Scott, you've had some success with the Spotify codes as well.
Yeah, dead easy. If you just Google Spotify scanner, and then you just you can put in a playlist, you can put in your artist profile, you can put in a release, whatever you want, and it generates just this little image for you. You can stick it on flyers, stick it on anything, and then people can literally with the phone open up Spotify, click the search icon, click the little camera icon on the top right, scan it, and it brings up wherever you've sent them to. It's dead easy, really nice and intuitive. And yeah, it just seems to work really well. So yeah, definitely worth looking into.
Cool. So other things to think about promoting your release is planning it out again, and this sort of extends to kind of how you promote the release, both before it's out, when it's out, and the weeks after it's released as well. Because again, I think the next couple of slides will talk about what you can do after release, because it can feel like a lot of the momentum runs out very quickly for a new release unless you plan. And it can be really hard to think in the moment. Like if you know you've got a post, but you haven't actually got anything lined up or any kind of promotional things, it can feel really, really overwhelming. So again, as part of the whole process of planning the release, if you can think about things you can post, and this is a list that Scott worked out for us, is some of these will feel really obvious things that you can promote, but as I said, in the moment, it can be hard to grab them. Whereas if you've got a bit of a schedule in terms of getting them out there and keeping the momentum of a release once it's already out, then hopefully you can make it manageable. So kind of just coming towards the end of things now a little bit in terms of the of getting approached to releases. I did want to mention royalties in relation to streaming now, and we will go through this. That's what the next session is going to be specifically about in 2 weeks. Streaming to do with royalties to do with all kinds of aspects of the music careers. But one thing that I'm always keen to just kind of try and illuminate is when your music is streamed, specifically like where those royalties go. Because I'm sure most of you will be familiar with the idea that if you upload your music to your distributor, you will get paid small amounts for each stream back through your distributor. But also there is an additional amount that gets paid to the songwriters as well, and that doesn't come back through your distributor. That gets paid directly to PRS and MCPS. So if you are not signed up to PRS and MCPS and your music is getting streams, then you are not getting, and you've written the song, then you are not getting paid the full amount that is coming back from the streaming services for your music. And again, I will talk about this in more detail at the next session in a couple of weeks. The other thing to mention is in terms of radio plays. I think most people are aware that if your music is getting played on the radio, that you will get royalties through PRS. But I also want to flag that we're seeing an increasing amount of royalties come from radio play through what's called MCPS. And that's specifically when your music is streamed on BBC Sounds, but also PPL. So PRS and MCPS are the bodies that collect royalties related to the songwriters, and PPL is the royalties related to the recording. So who's played on the recording and who's released the recording. And again, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have I won't go into all of that right now, but in 2 weeks' time, I'll kind of try and demystify and debrief on some of that more specifically as well. So yeah, we've come to the end of today's run through. Just about an hour actually as well, which is kind of what I was hoping for as well. I'm not sure if anyone's got any questions. If the stuff, someone else has, a couple of people have had to leave. Hopefully you found it useful. The other things to flag then are that if you do want a casual chat with us directly and one-to-one, that you can book a one-to-one chat with our team, which is every other Tuesday. The next one's next. We've scheduled them so that the opposite Tuesdays of this one, so all the Tuesdays in between this session, you can book a slot with us through that link. And also, as I said, through what we call our Launchpad Plus scheme, we do support releasing music and royalty collection as well, which again, I'll talk a bit more about in 2 weeks' time. And if you want to speak to us about that, you can contact us as well. So has anyone got any questions or things they want to go through? I'll tell you what, I will stop the recording now. Thanks for anyone watching this back, and then I will stop the screen sharing too.